In this video, we're going to talk about what makes a good photo and what doesn't. One of the most common questions that new photographers ask is this a good photo? Well, good is subjective. My definition of good is different than somebody else's. Me, personally, I like 3/4 angle shots. So something like this or like this. But to someone who doesn't like 3/4 angle shots, my photos aren't good. From a purely technical aspect, in general, there are 6 things that make a photo good. Number 1 is composition. Number 2 is having the correct exposure. Number 3 is having lines, shapes, or patterns. Number 4, dynamic lighting. Number 5 is a vanishing point. And number 6 is color. So let's break those down a little bit. Number 1, composition. So get creative. Are there other elements, people, buildings, etc., that I can use maybe to show scale or to tell a story? So something like this or like this. Remember, we want to try and go beyond, here's a picture of an airplane. Number 2, exposure. That's pretty self-explanatory. Your photo isn't too light and it's not too dark. Remember the exposure triangle. Number 3, having lines, shapes, or patterns. Our brains naturally like patterns and symmetry. So having something like this or like that. Number 4, dynamic lighting. So that's light either on my subject or on a person that's highlighting my subject. Something like this or like that. Number 5, vanishing point. So that's lines that are going to guide my eye to a certain point, like this. Finally, color. Either contrasting or complementary colors, or maybe even just having a pop of color in an otherwise black and white photo. So something like this or like that. Again, good is very hard to define, and it's different for everybody. You can have all of these elements, and inevitably, somebody will still think that your photo isn't good. Now, I can also definitely tell you, though, that likes, retweets, whatever, on social media definitely don't make you a good or a bad photographer, for that matter. Don't think that just because your photo only gets 5 likes on Instagram that you're a bad photographer. I've seen that a lot lately, so please don't fall into that trap. Remember, social media isn't real life, right? Plus, you're fighting an algorithm that pushes the most trending, but not necessarily the best, content to the top. I'm looking at you, Instagram. And while we're on the subject of Instagram, Instagram now pushes videos to the top and photos to the bottom. So, if you want feedback, actual, genuine, constructive feedback, ask another photographer who's been at it for a while for feedback. They'll honestly tell you what makes your photo good and what maybe you need to work on a little bit. Now, while that may not be easy to hear, that's how you get good photos, not likes on Instagram or views on Jet Photos. It's easier for me to tell you what doesn't make a good photo. Now, these are all mistakes that I personally have made, and I wish someone had told me about them earlier. Number 1, ramp clutter. So that's light fences, poles, cones, whatever. So this. Number 2, no prop blur. Remember, we want our shutter speed to be no more than 1/200th of a second to get prop blur. Number 3, canopy reflections, so this. Number 4 is a horizon that isn't straight. But that being said, I have seen lots of photos with horizons that are at an angle, and it's done very effectively. But in general, you want your horizon to be straight. Number 5 is backlighting. And just like with horizons, I've seen photos that are backlit, but it's done very, very well. But again, generally, we want to stay away from backlighting. So that's this right here. The final one is over-editing or under-editing your photos. I hate to break it to you, but you really do need to edit. But please don't overdo it. And we'll get more into editing in a later video. But in the next video, we finally get to the question that I probably get asked the most. How do you know when something cool is going to be at the airport? So please, stay tuned.